One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Welcome to One Step Ahead Radio. Another session, another week. James and I are here to take you through some of developments that we have seen happening in the world of sustainability, ESG impact, and general sort of a geopolitical, I would say, developments, regulation as well. James, many things happening around the world, but before we dwell into what is going on that side, some things that Lundquist is doing next week, which are quite extraordinary, interesting, and would be interesting for many people listening to this as well. What can you share with us on that one?
Yeah, hi Sasha. Good to be here and speaking with you again. Next week is going to be packed week for us in terms of events because we have for the first time we are putting together the Connecting the Dots Forum. So we've got a week-long series of events. In fact, it's even started. We've already had the first event yesterday and today, talking with foundations in universities. And next week we've got more sessions, and it's all coming together with a full day seminar that's open and free to attend if you register in Milan on Wednesday the 28th of May. So we've got already dozens of companies signed up. It's a very corporate feeling. We've been doing these kind of events and seminars for many years, and so we like to have a good, intimate and good networking environment because the professionals and the companies who actually do the stuff come along. So we've got people in sustainability, we've got people from finance, we've got people from investor relations, we've got people above all in communications, coming a lot from Italy, but people are traveling in. We've got a big contingent from Sweden, you'll be happy to know, and
Yes.
from Switzerland. So it's all going to be in English. And it's going to be focused on in the morning of the 28th. We're actually going to focus initially on sport, sustainability in sport, which is something that we've worked on for many years, and we think there's a lot of scope for sport to up its game, if you'll excuse
Yes.
the pun. And we're talking about sustainability as a driver of competitiveness, partnership, and credibility in sports. So really kind of like not the traditional, let's do some nice initiatives or social projects, but really something that can transform the business of sport and drive really future development. You know, we're talking about football, which has its ups and downs, but really getting into how that can build relationships with fans, with sponsors, with partners, and actually make the sport more respectable, more robust, and thrive and really have a quality environment around that.
Excellent. I mean, this is exciting, James.
This
Very exciting.
we've made a big effort. This is a big step for us because it's a lot of people coming in, speaking, and people from companies. You know, people on the ground who are actually doing this. It's not just us talking as nice consultants. It's actually companies who are coming in to talk about what they're how they're doing this. And then the afternoon, we'll be talking together as well. Our favorite topic. We're going to be talking about boosting your ability. And what sustainability and communications can do for your business. So again, talking about, you know, reframing the whole sustainability narrative and project, and sort of get out of this rut that it's been in. So that's why we want to talk about ability, not sustainability. So the ability to support the company, the competitiveness, really make it an active thing. And we're going to be talking about how not to get bogged down in CSRD and compliance and stuff like that, but really talk about how it can drive value for the customers, for business. We've got a couple of great case studies from Bracco in the healthcare sector, and from Poste Italiane, the Italian postal service, which is huge player also in financial services and logistics. So they're going to be sharing. So we've got really some good speakers talking about, you know, how they're really trying to move beyond this whole stale CSRD discussion that we've had for the last year or two. So anyone can sign up. There's information on the Lundquist website. So if you go to lundquist.it/forum, you can find out all that information. Hope people can come along.
Please do. And if you are about to do any traveling towards southern part of Europe and you have spare time, join us next week. And I think many people would find this very, very interesting. And on that topic, James, thank you very much for the intro on the events next week.
Yeah,
If
and
to
of
me,
course, I didn't really make it clear. Apologies. Sasha Besley will be speaking as well.
of course I
you-
will. Yes, yes,
that
yes,
was
yes,
kind of taken for granted, but yeah,
yes,
you will see the man in person
yes. I will
and
be
not just
there.
hear him on your podcast.
I will be there. I will be there, doing my best to explain what sustainability value proposition actually means in practice. So it is very, very relevant for many people. And I'm thinking, James, of the companies that are right now sitting with all these sustainability goals and the agendas. And I'm also thinking from European, if we're going to tackle Europe first right now
Mhm.
in terms of the updates,
Sure.
being responsible for this in a company or working with this must be quite challenging right now because you get these different messaging that is happening not only around the world but actually in Europe itself. On one hand, you have a number of investors in European Union and UK that are tripling down on sustainability, actually doing more than they would have done like 2 years ago because they truly believe this is something they need to support and something that will provide financial returns. On the one side, on the other side, you have this political sort of a push from France and Germany to delay and water down some of these requirements. And now the European Union is also considering losing criteria to help other countries, non-European countries like Eastern European countries or Balkan region countries or other countries to meet climate goals. I mean, what's your sort of an angle on that, James? Because I'm thinking, if I were a company, I would just stick to what makes sense to my business. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to give any clear advice on that.
Um, yeah, I think it's not even. I think it's more complicated even you just made out because even within the companies, you'll have different sensitivities and expectations. What you're kind of alluding to. There's kind of no kind of coherent, unitary position. First, we lost it on a global level. Now it's
Mhm.
fracturing even at a regional level. And what caught my eye was a couple of weeks ago, I think one of the first press conferences that the new German Chancellor gave in Brussels, Friedrich Merz, talking about the CSDDD, which
Yeah,
is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which has been kicked around as as regulation coming in, forcing a lot of large companies to do mandatory due diligence on their environmental and social impacts through their value chain. And that was kind of causing a huge, and it was a part of a whole vision about driving sustainability through, the big major corporations down into the supply chains and around the world, right? So it's
yeah,
like a global dimension to it. And Friedrich Merz not only just said, well, I think it's good that it's being watered down, it's being pushed, the whole omnibus package we've had in Europe. He said, I think we should get rid of it altogether, which is amazing because Germany was one of the first countries to actually have a national
yeah,
supply chain law. And he said, we're going to get rid of that as well. And this week, was it this week? Yeah, just a couple of days ago, Macron of France, the
yes,
French president, stood up and said more or less the same thing and said, let's scrap the new law requiring companies to address their negative impacts on human rights and the environment across their value chains. So that's kind of not just some technocrat in Brussels saying it, it's coming, right from the top of the two biggest players in the European Union. So I can understand people kind of going, okay, sure, but you've been drilling this down on us for like years,
yes,
and now, and now what are we? What's the picture? You mentioned something also about watering down the climate ambitions, which is again going to be tough to get your head around. Where do you think
Yeah,
that's going?
yeah, but I think it's a sort of a same trend. But what makes we can complicate this in many different angles and dimensions. I mean, I was looking at this European Investment Bank study, that survey that has been done. It's recently published, basically saying that 66% of EU business, basically pooled in this survey, 66% said they would face, and they are facing, threats from physical impacts of climate change, yet only 22% had an adaptation strategy,
Hmm.
which is, for me, it's sort of a, and this survey and the people have been elaborating around that. Basically, a behavioral economist could point to several possible explanations for this mismatch. I mean, we humans, we tend to show a status quo bias, basically sticking with
Mm.
the established practices. What we see and what you can see in this one is that we exhibit basically a herding behavior, meaning that we are less likely to invest heavily in any kind of adaptation unless our peers are doing the same thing. The perhaps the most significant cognitive bias, according to the late Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, is the optimism bias. Even if you can grasp intellectually that that you and your peers are facing a risk, you're likely to underestimate the chances of it biting you. I
Mm.
mean, and I have this sort of, I remember this from the war at Balkans that I experienced, is that, when you're sitting in the trenches, you think it's going to hit somebody else, but not me. This is a very interesting way how we're thinking. But from sort of a climate target perspective, and this is something you and I discussed earlier, we anticipate that we globally have the same goal, but apparently we don't have. And how we're going to, arrive at that particular sort of a understanding. We don't have the same goal in the US, European Union, and in China, in Asia in general, because we see challenges in a different way. And with this study done by European Investment Bank, you wonder sort of 66% are experiencing physical consequences, but 22% have done any action on adaptation. I mean, there is a big gap in this. And I don't actually understand from a business point, financial point of view, how the companies are really planning to address this, because this could cause a quite significant, disruption in
Yeah.
the supply
Yeah.
chains and the way how they operate business. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems that financial markets are becoming more short-termist
Mm.
at the same time in terms of reading the leaves of what's going to happen in terms of trade opportunities, and these kind of dynamics going to have huge ramifications, but they're kind of being pushed down the line and saying, well, that's further away. I mean, apart from the pension funds, I think that was an interesting point we've had, is seeing,
Yeah.
pension funds actually coming out and in Europe and reviewing their mandates, reviewing their investments in terms of whether they are actually managing to embed their climate scenarios into their investment portfolios. And so those seems to be the ones who are kind of sitting out and sticking out their head above the sand and really trying to push through that decision, because they have that long time horizon where they can see the risks inherent in what you've just describing.
Yeah, but I think also, James, I mean, we are sort of we are past the point of reiterating the importance of mitigation. I mean, mitigating climate change doesn't seem to be the game that we're going to win, or at least not the game that it's going to work around the world. So, what is left is basically a significant adaptation. And I was looking at the research actually done by London Stock Exchange. It's published new research, which basically found that companies with exposure to adaptation solutions generated totally revenue of 1 trillion last year. You can actually figure this one out. It's not a rocket science, that we will need to adapt buildings, we will need to adapt infrastructure, water, services, all different kinds of things that will physically be impacted by climate change. And these companies, if you're in this space, they are clearly seeing that as a business opportunity. So it's not only about mitigating something that we obviously will have difficulties to do, but also actually doing whatever you can to jump on an adaptation train as fast as you can.
Wow. Yes, of course. That's going to be huge. Everyone usually thinks about public money looking after adaptation, right?
Yeah, and this is a
Uh,
completely new thing that it's opening up. It's going to be very, very interesting to see. I mean, this is Europe. If we move on
Sure.
to U.S., there have been some interesting developments in the U.S. I mean, we have been hearing about the pushback and the rollback, I would say, of many commitments, especially in the financial industry, Wall Street in the U.S. On the climate-related commitments. But now there has been a pushback from the other side, and that is that basically two Democratic senators, Sheldon Whitehouse and Elizabeth Warren, have been issuing the probe or targeting the financial Wall Street sector in U.S. With this particular one. And basically, the probe seeks to examine the extent to which banks have allegedly caved into pressure from Republicans and fossil fuel interests to abandon their fiduciary duty to manage the financial risk that stem from climate change. This is according to the letters that have been sent to the banks, and in the letters, which are addressed to chief executive officers of JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Citigroup, these two senators, Democratic senators, asked that the banks provide documents on internal discussions that led the banks to leave the climate alliances. They are also seeking emails and memorandums outlining internal talks at the banks on the financial risk related to climate change, the draft letter shows. I mean, James, this is interesting because there is now, obviously, some Democrats are sort of pushing back. The question is, will this be possible? Will they be able to actually make this happen? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think that at the moment, what we've seen in terms of the extremely proactive, to understate it a bit, stance that's coming out of the Trump administration is a reflection of the fact that not only did Trump win the presidency, but the Republican Party controls both houses, gives them enormous power and weakens these kind of initiatives that come from the Democrat Party. Um, and but the American system runs around quite quickly. So they have midterms in 18 months or whatever. So that control is solid until the end of 2026. And then the questions open up about some kind of capacity, or depends how these elections go, and how things swing. But usually the midterms is when the party of opposition can actually make strides back. So it's clear that there's people on watch, then that there's people there debating and also putting into question kind of the narrative around these kind of this walking back around, above all, this kind of key concept of fiduciary duty,
Yeah.
which is kind of the key conflict point.
Yes, it is. And this is what, I mean, if you think about it from that perspective, I mean, taking the climate change consequences as a political hostage in a sort of an ideological way, it's quite a sort of an interesting approach because it's at the end of the story, it's about science. It's what the numbers are actually telling us, and what they are writing in this letter to these banks is actually that I mean, the Wall Street retreat from environmental policy is basically posing a risk to the U.S. financial system and the broader economy because they see this clearly as it has nothing to do with politics. It's actually due with the fact that the system in itself, due to the physical and transitional risk, will impose certain costs. And if we try to move this discussion from politics into the practice, or into reality where this is actually happening, maybe this debate could look in a completely different way. It doesn't today. It has been politicized so much. So I guess we need to go back to science. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another angle to this that I was actually reading about, which I thought was quite curious, and I think this battle, the same kind of battle, is playing out within central banks.
Yes.
So there's an interesting debate that I was reading about within the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, which usually doesn't make the headlines. No, it's like
It's an
it's
utterly boring thing. Yes, I agree
yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
But in several occasions over the past 18 months, the American components on this body have been winning concessions by taking a hard line over the extent to which they are, regulating and controlling banking industry and their climate risks. So it's the same debate being played out at a kind of a higher level. And so there's this ongoing, battle between the
Mm,
European Central Bank and the Fed on the other side
mm.
in terms of who has the jurisdiction and which way it's going to go in terms of climate disclosures. So again, that's going to be another place to watch.
And, all of this that sounds too complicated between the central banks, financial system, in general, it's not that easy because it's hard to, comprehend how it works. But in general, it boils down to, if we're going to talk the sort of a normal language, it's who's going to pay the price and who's going to make money on the consequences of climate change going forward. I mean, there are many discussions around this in the financial industry, and many people that I meet on a regular basis that would say that, yeah, it is happening and it's going to cause a lot of trouble going forward. There will be winners and there will be losers, and we want to know which side we're going to be on. And there is no so much sort of a moral take on that. It's a more take that this is happening, and we are most likely not going to be able to mitigate this. But at certain point, we will need to adopt. Businesses and sectors will need to adopt, and the ones that do that and do that quickly at scale will be the winners going forward. So it's sort of a taking the edge out of the politics, just thinking about the practical sort of consequences of this probably is much more sound way of looking at it, and then thinking about defending the political stance of right or left or center or whatever.
Excellent. Where else do we want to go before we close? What
Before
other
we close,
geographies
I
do we
think
want to
there is a
cover?
geography is interesting, and of course, I mean, the China is probably is getting some attention because I think it's the first month that they are running a larger part of the country with renewable energy, which is the latest news, which is very good. However, we know that China is still producing a lot of energy from coal, and it's extensively supporting other countries to develop new coal resources, which is something that people know, and it's not really good. But it's good that China is able to produce so much energy that they can, at least to a certain extent, be renewable some months or at least some parts of the year. Now, there is another geography, which is Africa. And every time I read about Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, I get excited because this is a place that I have a very specific relationship to. I've been there many times, spent time in Katanga province, seen the places, the mines of cobalt that is used for production of everything that we know and we call renewable.
Mhm.
Now there is a big fight happening in Congo, and for most people that would know this story, there is basically a Chinese conglomerate operating in Katanga province, which is a major source of income for Congolese government. And they are so integrated into the Congolese economy that they are the ones that are basically determining the price of cobalt that is sold on the world market. And in February, it came as a big surprise to the market that the Democratic Republic of Congo's president put a ban on any further export of cobalt from DRC because the pricing of cobalt has gone down significantly and has been at the lowest level since many years back. Now,
Right.
you can imagine now that you have a resources, James, which are
Mhm.
yours, that belong to your country, and you cannot influence the price on that at all. I mean, and this is what is happening in Congo. So what they did is that they've sent a delegation to new president in the United States, and they are actually asking US to help them, which opens up a new conflict between China and US in a third country, in this case, resource-rich Congo. And this is something that is, I think, only the beginning. It will probably continue in other parts of the world, especially in Africa. But it reminds me on the fact that parts of the transition that we deem as being part of the solution, as electrical vehicles and many other things, may not at the end be the solution that we actually need.
In fact, kind of connected to that, do you know what an electrostate is? Everyone's heard of petrostate, right? We've had those for
Yeah. Yeah,
many
electrostate.
decades.
I like that. Yeah, I like it.
Electrostate.
Yeah.
There was a Financial Times little article saying, "Will China be the first electrostate?"
Yeah.
And the way kind of it's now positioning itself, not just on the domestic front, but as a global superpower. And everyone knows about rare earths control, but also kind of connects to what you're saying again about the cobalt story in Africa. To be an electrostate means that you dominate global supply chains.
Mm.
And this last week has seen the IPO of CATL on the Hong Kong
Yeah, main
market,
sense.
which was a
Right.
huge success, at least in terms of the share price rising. And they're talking about the electrification of huge swathes of industry
Mm.
and also lorries and heavy goods. I mean, they're really kind of thinking fast and moving fast, and you can only do that if you're really dominating global supply chains. And all of that money, by the way, going to invest from the IPO in China, in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
going to invest in a plant in Hungary.
Yes.
So there's all kinds of cross currents and trade implications and geopolitical implications of being who the electrostates of this century compared to the petrostates of the last one.
Thank you, James. I completely agree, and we can round up with the latest. I mean, I caught up some comments on latest Al Gore speech in one of these conferences. I think this one was in London, if I'm not mistaken, and he was sort of asked about his view on what's going on, and it was a lot of different sort of questions. But one of the things he said is that the big wheels and the wheels of change are basically rolling in the right direction. They are small wheels that are sort of turning back and trying to sort of distort the general movement. But we should not sort of forget that we are in as a on a global level, if you're looking at it, that we have been moving in the right direction. We need to continue doing so, and it's a positive thing. But what he also said, which is something that I think we can come across, I mean, both you and I, and what we're doing is this toxic positivity, what he calls, is
Yes.
this it's going to work out, and we can human ingenuity and all of these things, and being sober about who we are as a species, and also being sober about what powers are we sort of fighting against, or what are the things that we are fighting for. So it's sort of a let's round it up with that and say thank you all for listening to One Step Ahead Radio. Share it with your friends, family, and whoever you think should listen. Next week, as James said, it's a big week for Lundquist and for many other participating in these seminars. It's almost like a small Davos arranged in Milan, which is very nice. And James, see you next week in person
Yep.
in Milan. And
We'll
we will, of
continue this
course,
conversation
yes, we will continue conversation and we'll
live.
get back to the audience towards the end of next week. Thank you very much for listening. And James, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.